Today, I do believe that God has a message for each of us, though. I think that God wants to speak today. I think that God actually speaks a lot. Like, he's actually talking a lot. And a lot of times, we just don't have our ears ready to listen and our hearts tuned to listen, right? And so I think that God has a message for every person in this room. And I am very, very excited to share it with you today. The last couple weeks, we've been in a series called Headline Issues. Now, next week, Pastor Lee is going to start a new series called Rich Toward God. There's some books that go along with that. You're going to want to grab one of those on your way out. That's going to be an incredible series. You're not going to want to miss that. But we've been in this series called Headline Issues. And so here's where we went. And so if you're just jumping in for the first time, I'm going to tell you where we went. We talked about sexual confusion in our culture. And we talked about how God really has an idea of what sexuality should look like. And that idea is different than the culture. And so we talked about that. We talked about radical acts of evil and the things that happen in the world that kind of make us go, man, why would someone ever do that? And we talked about how evil really starts in a human heart. And that's where it always starts. And so we kind of talked about that. We also talked about the hot button issue of racial tension in our culture. And we talked about how the church is actually called by God to break down barriers and stand up for racial injustices because God himself broke the barrier between him and us by coming to earth and dying on a cross. And his imagination of the church is a church of many people, of many races, all proclaiming his glory. And that's what God's vision is for that, and how the church should be leading in the world in that way. We also talked about how Christianity and this faith that we proclaim has been kind of pushed to the side in our culture, and some of that is our own fault. And some of that is other reasons, and we talked about that. Today, we're going to wrap this series up, and I want to kind of turn it around. And I want to ask this room of believers, what is our response to the culture we live in? Like, what is our response to all of the headlines that we have seen? Like, what if God could come up with a headline for Christians to make in our times, what would he want that to read? Like, just a headline, like, just like a short phrase. Like, what would he want that to be? If we could make the news, if the whole culture would look in at the church for a second, what would be that phrase that they would go, okay, this is what they're about? I mean, if God could create a headline and everyone could see that, like it's kind of like God coming into this room and coming up on this stage and having a meeting, and we all lean in to see what he would have to say to us. Like, what's the headline? Like, what's the takeaway? Like, what's our response? Like, what if we could make a headline with our Christianity? What would that be? And so, before we get into that answer, when I first moved to Florida 3 years ago, I was really excited about a particular fruit that Florida has an abundance of, and that's Florida oranges. And so I was super excited to get some of these elusive, world-known Florida oranges. And so my wife and I went to like a local Publix with the intention of getting some Florida oranges. And we go to the produce section, and there's this pile of just majestically stacked, these beautiful orange, large, just the color is perfect oranges. And I go to, grab some, and I look at the sign that says California oranges. Now that's strange, because Florida has so many oranges, right? And they're world known. People put it on the labels of the orange juice that you buy in stores. And so, I'm like, where do I get these things? I don't want California oranges. If I wanted California oranges, I'd get on a plane, and I'd go to California, and I'd buy an orange. I want a Florida oranges. They're just hard to find. I found out where they keep them now, but, it was strange that all I could find, and I looked into this, and the reason behind it is, in the climate of California, the way that the oranges grow there, is it produces much more beautiful looking oranges on the outside. But as we all know in Florida, they're much more juicy here, but they're a lot harder to eat, right? You try to stab the peel, and I mean, the Florida oranges, they just have a lot of blemishes. They don't look as pretty. And so store owners, they want to sell stuff. And so they line up those beautiful California, bring them in from all over the place. And so when you go into Publix, it's like a lot of strangers from California are there, and you really just want some Florida oranges. So they're here. And in the book of 1 Peter, Peter's writing to different believers who are scattered throughout different areas of the world. Okay, so they're all over the place. And they are facing persecution for their faith in Jesus. They're facing all kinds of, hatred and push against and all of this because of their faith, because they're different, because they're standing out. And that opposition is really severe. I don't want you to miss that. It's not just like someone says, oh, you believe in God. Like, they are arresting these people. They are taking them to trial, and a lot of times we're executing these people. And we're not talking about, humane versions of execution. We're talking about brutal executions for people who just believed in Jesus. In fact, if you were to look at the headlines in those days, like of the Roman Gazette, if you were to just pick up their paper, and you would see warnings about, watch out for these crazy people who think some guy rose from the dead, and now they say he is Lord instead of Caesar. Watch out for these people. These people are strange. They're not from here. Like, we've got to get rid of these people. And so the opposition was harsh. And so Peter is writing a letter as an encouragement to them to say, hey, hold on to this faith in these troubled times. And so as Peter opens this letter, so if you have a Bible, if you have YouVersion on your phone, whatever you use, go ahead and turn to 1 Peter chapter 1. Peter opens his letter with an interesting phrase, an interesting identifier of what he calls believers. And I love this, and I think it's significant. 1 Peter 1:1 says this, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect, strangers in the world. And so he's giving ourselves an identity. And that word strangers could be translated as exiles in your Bible. It could say sojourners, foreigners, aliens. Like, it has a whole lot of nuances to it. But in your outline, I want you to fill in, hey, we are strangers. Peter wants them to know right off the bat, hey, you are a stranger. And what that word means in this sense is we're literally someone that's passing through. We're just passing through this world. But at the same time, we're not just abstractly passing through. We have a connection and a place and a life in this world. It's temporary, but it's active. It's not passive. You don't want to miss that. So we're passing through. He says, you're strangers. You don't belong here. You're different. You're foreigners. This is not your home. It's a temporary situation. It's necessary. It's important, but it's not forever. And so we're strangers. That's what you need to know right off the bat. If you're a believer in Jesus this morning, you are a stranger. Now, what do strangers do? What do foreigners do? Well, to common people or people of those areas, they do strange things, right? I mean, compared to the norms, they're just different. They do things that stand out. They sound different. They appear different. They dress different. They sometimes can appear intimidating, right? A stranger intimidating, or a foreigner intimidating, or threatening, or whatever. And that's why the Christians are being persecuted in the first century and the second century, is because they're standing out. And how they're standing out is they're opposing radical truths and ideas about how everyone should be living under God, a different kind of system of following God. And that is causing, trouble in their life. But they're strangers, and so they're strange. Their doctrine is strange. Their teaching is strange. Their decisions are strange. The way they look is strange. And so my question, as we've already going through this, is what does God want to do with a bunch of strangers in a place that they're just passing through? Like, what does God want to do in a world with strangers that honestly is hostile in opposition to the work of God? Don't mistake that. The world has never been on the same page as God. It will never be on the same page as God, because God's ways are higher than any ways of this world. But he has a group of people who he calls his own, and he calls us strangers. What would he do with us as we exist and pass through this world? Like, as we go to work, what does he want to do with us? As we do public life, as we network with all sorts of different people, as we go out to dinner, as we take our kids to the park, as we go to class, as we shop at the store, as we attend different events in our community or sporting events or something like that, as we go on dates, as we are retired and doing the things that we do now, like as we go to the gym, like what headline does Jesus want us to make? Like as we're passing through, as we're just doing life. Like if there's one message that he would want to send to all of those arenas that we're involved in, to the world, what would he want that one thing to be? What headline would he want us to make? And if you're here today and you're not a believer, you're not sure about this message and Jesus, and that's totally okay. I just hope that, I'm glad that you're here because you're going to get a chance to listen to what Jesus expects of his followers and what it looks like. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, we're strange, okay? We're strangers. Like, you're right, we are strange. There's so many strange things about us. Let's look at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13 through 16. We're going to dive into this text just for a few minutes. It says in verse 13, therefore, we're strange. Okay, read this with that lens on. Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. As obedient children, do not conform to all the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. Be strange because to the world my ways are strange. And so we're really talking about holiness, and we're called to be just as God, right? That's what we're called to be. And that's going to look very strange to the rest of the world. Think about it. It's going to require strange thinking. That's a blank you can fill out. Strange thinking. If you are a believer, you are called to have strange or different thinking. Let me illustrate that. We don't think about ourself first in a world where self is king. It's normal to think about yourself first in this world. But in the world that Jesus is setting up, it's not normal. In fact, what he expects is for us to do something different. I mean, we live in a world that lacks incredibly self-control, right? And a sober mind. Like, we live in a world that is not alert. We live in a world that is greatly lacking. I mean, think about it. Just think about your social media, for example. I mean, people are sharing opinions in 144 characters or less, and then realizing, oops, I better delete that because I wasn't thinking before I posted that. My mind wasn't very sober, and I said that, and I shouldn't, so now I'm going to delete that. And people are just rushing to their opinions. They're moving with emotion, and they're posting and deleting. I mean, that's what's going on in the world. I mean, in our world, telling yourself no, telling our desires no, surrendering your wants, that is actually quite strange. Because most people do what they want to do. I mean, think about it. Like, we want to tell those people off, right? We want to harshly criticize those people. We don't want to take no for an answer. I mean, it's normal to give in to every desire you have because, after all, the self is king. But as Christians, we're called to have a different type thinking. I want you to imagine, like, the nicest car that you could ever picture. Like, maybe it's the one that you wish you drove. Maybe you have it and you can give me a ride in it someday. Like, I mean, maybe it's like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something like that, and it's just beautiful, like a beautiful color. I mean, that engine just, hums. It's just beautiful. Nice stereo, nice seats. But when you sat in the car, you discovered there's no steering wheel. Wouldn't it be much use to you then, would it? Like, if you had all of this amazing stuff, but you had no way to control this thing. And in our culture, it's normal to read about people crashing their lives. It's normal in your family to hear about and to struggle with people making terrible decisions and their lives going in a direction that is not good. It's normal to hear that going on. It's normal to hear about people burning out. It's normal to hear about people giving up on that marriage. It's normal that people just give up on their dreams. It's normal that people are giving up on changing and breaking the addictions that they have. That's mainstream. That's normal. We're called to think differently. I mean, there's something unchristian to me about being overly pessimistic, right? Because one of the words that describes the early church going through all the persecution is joy. Like they had joy in their struggles, right? You can't have joy and be pessimistic, all right? And a lot of us are really pessimistic. We look at the world and we go, oh man, gee whiz, golly, like this is the world is going to shreds and there's nothing anybody can do. But no, the Christian mind says we're expecting God to move. We're expecting God to get his will done. We know that God is in control, and we're not worried about what's going on right now because he has a plan. We never thought for once that this world was going to actually follow him totally, right? I mean, we're fooling ourselves. So when we hear things and we see things, we respond differently. We respond like, man, like God's going to do something. I mean, the world has enough critics and commentators and naysayers and all of that. Like the world needs some people with some optimism, and that should be people in the church because that's really strange. And the reason why we can have optimism is because you and I have a strange hope. We think differently. We don't think about ourselves first. We try to think positively in the light of God in this world. We have a strange hope. That's why we can think differently. That's what the scriptures say. Our hope is not in our jobs. Our hope is not in our self-worth. Our hope is not in the comfortable life that we worked so hard to create. Our hope is not in that large home with 7 bathrooms. Why does anybody need 7 bathrooms? I mean, our hope is not based on our reputation. Our hope is not based on all of the good things we've done and everything we've done right. So these people say this about us and all this kind of stuff. Our hope is not built upon our acts of service. Our hope is not built upon our carefully positioned social media accounts and all the perfect pictures and the comments and the likes and edits and deletes and reposts and all this kind of stuff. Our hope is not in our appearance. It's not in our clothing. It's not in our beauty or what we think is beauty. It's definitely not in our 401k, and it's definitely not in our own ability to do stuff. Our hope is in a Jewish carpenter who said all of that stuff is going to pass away, and that rose from the dead and said there's more to life than this. That's our hope. And so it's kind of strange. Honestly, it is. A Jewish carpenter who died and rose again is the central piece of your hope and my hope. That's a little strange, but that's the reality. And because it's strange, there's more that goes with it. I mean, we believe that there is forgiveness and freedom, and that's what every human heart longs for. And the thing is, we don't have to buy it. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to work for it. Jesus just wants us to have it just because he wants relationship with us, he chooses us, he values us, he accepts us. And so we have this everlasting life because he wants it for us, not because you were here 4 out of a month, like because you're stellar church attendance. I'm sorry, that doesn't impress God. It's not because you're connected to a life group, even though we tell you to be all the time. Like, that's not what you get your worth from or your hope from. It's not because you're just, everything is superstar Christian mode. Like, that's not it. It's because he just wants it for you. He loves us like that. And when we have this hope that's different and strange from the rest of the world, when we get that diagnosis, when we hear that news, when we turn on the news and we see that country is bombing that country again, and when we flip down our news feed and we see more and more hatred, you and I, because of our faith in the hope that is eternal, we have hope. That's the position of ourselves because we are strangers. We know we're not going to be here forever. We know we have a place that is far better than this that we're called to, and how we respond to tough situations is quite different and quite strange, but quite appropriate. This strange thinking and this strange hope produces something in us. Strange living, holiness. Because we think differently, not about ourselves first, and we have this hope, this salvation, it affects how we live. We're told in this scripture to be holy. Now, holy isn't popular, okay? It's different. It's strange. It's not mainstream. We're told to be just like him. Why? Well, Craig Rochelle wrote a book called Weird and also preached through a series called Different. And some of these ideas come from him, and I'm grateful for him for ideas like this, but we're called to be different because of what mainstream is. Do you know what's mainstream? Hatred is mainstream. You know what isn't? Kindness. Kindness isn't normal, that's strange. You know what's mainstream? You know what's normal today is racism. Don't ever for a minute think that it's ever going to go away, because it never has. Brokenness is mainstream. Depression is only growing. That's what's normal in our world. That's what's mainstream. Gossip is normal. I mean, just think about your job. I mean, gosh, it's so normal there, and it's hard to deal with. I mean, what's normal? Attacking leaders in positions is normal, right? Whether you like them or not. And I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about the work arena. I'm talking about any arena. I'm talking about the family unit, right? Whoever's in charge, we are just throwing a bunch of crap at them all the time. That's normal, right? It's normal to tweet that out. It's normal. That's just the way things are now. It's normal. Those are the things that make headlines. It's strange to have a hope. It's strange to have marriage that lasts. It's even strange not to have sex before marriage. I mean, we forgot about how, that's, we don't even talk about that anymore. We talk about a whole bunch of other issues with sexuality. But we forgot about how strange that is. It's strange. It's not normal for people to choose paths of radical love anymore because we're lovers of self. It's strange for people to show up to church more than once a month. I mean, that's what the statistics tell us. It's strange. It's strange to give away a portion of what you make for the kingdom, or it's strange to give away anything and expect anything in return. That's strange anymore. It's strange to attempt things that would take bold and crazy faith. It's strange. It's strange to just stop after having a drink or two. That's strange. It's more normal for people to go, man, should I drive? Oh, I think I'm good. And let me just say, if you're drinking that much to where you have to ask, man, can I drive? You should probably cool off a little bit, okay? But that's normal, okay? It's strange not to participate in entertainment that others are indulging in. And why do we want it so bad anyway? Like, why do we have to see that show or be a part of that music? Like we're called to be holy. Like, is this show holy? Like, is it making me holy? Is it helping me? But I mean, but people are just saying, hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. It's strange to forgive someone and not expecting any kind of revenge at all. That's strange anymore. But in the scriptures, in 1 Peter, it says, do not conform. Don't expect to be mainstream. If you're going to be a Christian that's radically following Jesus, you're going to be strange. You're going to be different. You're going to stand out. I love what it says in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 3 and 4. It says, for you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do. And the word pagans is normal people. Living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. I love this. They think it's strange that you do not plunge in with them. You see it? We're called to be different. We're called to be strange, and other people need to see it. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 10 says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as aliens, and here's our word again, and strangers in the world, abstain from sinful desires, which, by the way, is very strange to abstain from the sinful desires we have, which war against your soul. Live such good lives among the normal people that though they accuse you of doing wrong, being strange, they may see your good, strange deeds and glorify God. You're called to be strange. You're called to stand out. The way you think is different. The way you live should be different. The way you go about your business should be different because you are called to be holy, just as God is holy. And so maybe the headline that God would want for the world to see, like I can see it now. Are you ready for it? Like Christians living just as Jesus lived. Now that would be a strange world, wouldn't it? Like, Christians are living just like Jesus. Like, you couldn't find a believer who is not like Jesus. Wouldn't that be strange? Like, but it's what we need. Like, our faith that has moved from our heads to our hearts to our hands. The community knows it. Our neighbors know it. Our coworkers see it. Our classmates couldn't miss it. They're all looking in at our lives and they're going, that's strange. It's like Jesus right in front of me. Like, I picture God looking down from heaven going, man, this is what I want. They are living just like you, Jesus. Look at them. The world is seeing me through them. This is what I taught them to do. This is what I died for. This is what I had hoped. They're actually, can you believe this? They're actually mistaking me for them. Like, they actually think that I'm you. Whoa. This God's looking down and he's like, oh, and they're following my commands. And now he's saying, whoa, now I can bless them. Oh, I want to bless them so bad, but they want to be normal all the time. I can't bless them until they decide to be strange. And so he's like, now I can bless them because my ways are strange, but they're the ways that lead to life. This other way leads to destruction. And wow, now I can give them that peace that they've been praying for. Now they can feel the love that I have for them. Now they can feel the forgiveness that they've been crying out for. Could you imagine it on the front page of the newspaper, on your news feed, on your favorite blog? Christians live just as Jesus lived. What a headline that would be. What an impact that would make. And so what does that look like to live just as Jesus lived? What type of strange things will we have to do? Well, it looks like a story that James Barnett told at a recent youth event that I was at about it. It looks like an unlikely little old lady who had a church in Fort Myers, Florida some years ago, walked in on the pastor while he was praying, which is what pastors do all the time, by the way, when we're at church. Walked on him while he was praying, and she told him this. She said, I feel like God is calling me to do something crazy. And she goes on to say, I think he's asking me to bring strippers cookies and tell them about the love of Jesus, right? Because there's been this strip club that had moved in, right next to the church. And a lot of Christians were kind of, boycotting and saying, oh, you're going to hell, and, all this kind of stuff. And so she goes in with this crazy idea. The pastor's like, that's kind of strange, Granny. Like, okay, like, my blessing with you. And so the following day, that tiny woman walked into the doors of the strip club. She bought a stripper's time. And when the clock started, she started telling the stripper about the great love that Jesus had for her. Over time, that stripper, having experienced God's love, quit her job. On the surface level, strippers and grannies don't mix at all. Like, that's strange. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's strange. To reach strippers, like, who's going to say, I know, send in the grannies. They're going to be able to do it. No one's going to say that. But God says, send in the grannies. I'm about to baffle this world with the strange kind of living that I'm going to put on every single one of my followers. And if they would just follow every prompting I give them to live and love just as, who knows what could happen. At this very same club, she started bringing more and more of her granny friends. And eventually, one by one, strippers kept quitting the industry because of the love of Jesus. And eventually, that club had to close down. And isn't that fantastic? That's awesome. But that's strange. That's not normal. But she listened to God. And I believe that God is prompting each one of us to love people in that same kind of radical way, just like he did. That's what he did in the scriptures, right? He was always around people that nobody would be around. Look what it says in John chapter 13, verse 34. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other, not the people that are easy to love, not the people that are just like you, not your favorite people, everyone, right? Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples, just as Jesus, just as. Love, just as. That's number one. Love, just as. Not, don't fill in anything else. Like we always try to put like reasons why we're not loving people and justify ourselves, right? Well, I don't have time, or they have this going on, and this might be weird if I, do this, and I don't know, I can't teach kids, or I don't know about that. Like we don't just leave it at just as, right? We always put all this other list of stuff. But we're called to love just as, period. You see someone that needs some love, you feel like somebody needs the love of Jesus, you go love them. That's your call. Who are you loving right now in your life as you're passing through, just as Jesus loved you, which is without, he loves us in an incredible way. He doesn't hold anything against us, and that's the same love, the same measure we're called to give to every person. John 13:14-15 says, "And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I've given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you." So what is he saying? Number 2, serve just as. Okay, love just as. Have a heart for people. Do crazy stuff that shows love. Get that. Serve just as. Like, who are you serving right now? Just as Jesus served you. I mean, I would go as far to say if you're not serving others in any way, and I'm not just talking about in the church, I'm talking about anywhere. If you're not using your gifts for the world, I would wonder, are you really pursuing Jesus? Because if you are, you're going to be like him, right? Like you pursue Jesus, you become like him, right? Am I missing something there? Like we love just like him and we serve others. I mean, how different are you if you're not loving and serving? I mean, because that's who Jesus was. I mean, it's really strange to say, hey, I'm going to drive a group of homeless men and women to a church every Sunday. That's really strange to do. It's even more strange to spend time with them and teach them the gospel. It's really strange for somebody to go, hey, I know, I'm going to be a small group leader for a bunch of kids that are not my own and ride in vans with them and just do life with them. Like, that's really strange. Why would you ever expose yourself to that kind of noise? Like, there's no way. Like, it's really strange to give up a Saturday to serve somewhere out in the community. Now I'm talking about the church. I'm just saying somewhere that needs help. You drive by so many broken places on your way here every week. Like, somebody ought to be doing something about that. It's really strange to show up to a service that's not the one you attend because you want to serve at it, because you want to create an experience for people to come and meet with God. And you don't just want to be a consumer, you want to be a giver. That's really strange. And you do it just because you want to, not because somebody said, hey, I have a need, could you do this? Like, oh, hey, we have this need over here, and you got to check, serve is one of the 5 pursuits, and you can check that thing off. No. You serve because you want to. You serve because you love. You serve because that's what Jesus did for you. And we ought to do it for other people. What are you doing to serve just as Jesus served? I mean, living just as Jesus did looks a lot like a group of Samoan firefighters who traveled to California to fight the wildfires that are going on there. I want to show you a clip of these guys, and they are just incredible because they're very strange. They're singing. I want you to check this out. Just look at these guys coming down. They're singing a hymn right now in their own native language. And you would know instantly that they're unified, right? They're going to put out a fire that is wreaking havoc in the lives of other people. And these guys are singing in unison. It's really beautiful, actually. And they're singing to God together. You wouldn't doubt that these guys are unified, that they have a mission, and the mission is to go put that fire out Look at what it says in John chapter 17, verse 22 and 23 in the Message translation. The goal is for all of them. This is Jesus praying to God about the church. The goal is for all of them to become one heart and mind. Here's our phrase again. Just as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, so that they may be one heart and mind with us. Then the world might believe that you, in fact, sent me. The same glory you gave me, I gave them, so they'll be as unified and together as we are, I and them and you and me. Then they'll be mature in this oneness and give the godless world evidence that you sent me and loved me in the same way you've loved me. Number 3, we need unity just as God has with Jesus. That's his vision for the church. And what are you doing right now to bring unity to what we're all about here and globally? I mean, can we all agree that the mission of the church is non-debatable? Like, it's not. It needs to be kept in center focus. Jesus said, my mission is to seek and save the lost in Luke. Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 28, don't play music too loud, form committees to pick carpet colors, be critical about church leaders when they don't preach well, and so on. No, he doesn't say that. Sorry, wrong message. Let me go to a different translation here. No, he says, go and make disciples. And that should be your cry of unity, that you're here because you want to be strange, and you want to go reach people who are normal, and that way is perishing. See, Jesus is Lord. The Bible is true. There is forgiveness. Jesus rose from the dead. Now let's go reach some people. That's what will bring unity to the church. The way we say it here is pursuing Jesus, transforming lives. We believe, we're strange enough to believe that if we pursue Jesus, that lives will be transformed in our path as we go through this life. And people will notice, so many Christians today, they want to start fires. They don't want to put any out. And hear this, the world is hungering for a community that actually has unity. And that's God's vision for the church. And that has all kinds of implications on how we love and serve people and all that kind of stuff. But unified together, we can go put out a lot of fires and we can go make a difference in this world. So what are you doing to sacrifice and unify around the mission of the church? No matter where you're at today, Jesus' call is always, you can come just as you are. You don't ever have to come to God with this whole life figured out. You might not even be close to this strange, holy life that I'm talking about. You might not be loving other people the way Christ loved you. You might not be serving anyone from yourself. You might be struggling in an addiction, struggling in a marriage. You're caught in something. And maybe you're coming to a place today where it's time for me to stop being regular, to stop being normal. It's time for a strange change in my life. It's time that I take Jesus seriously and let him transform me. I want to share with you just briefly about how I came to know Jesus. It all began for me at 3 a.m. on my bedroom floor as an 18-year-old man. I just finished partying that night. Before Christ, I used and abused drugs for about 5 years as a teenager, and that led me to a hole of hurt. And I did a lot of things that hurt people. I was alone. I felt an immense amount of guilt. I had made an enormous amount of mistakes. I told everyone around me that God wasn't real for years and years and years. My life became consumed with fear and depression and guilt. And it was so bad that one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I just was weeping on my floor. I didn't know if I had the strength to carry life on, and I'm 18 years old. And then I just had this thought that I think God put in my head, and it was just this question, what about God? I don't know who God is. And so I remember praying that night because I was so desperate, this prayer: God, I don't even know who you are, but if you're real, would you help me? And over the series of a couple of weeks and a couple of different encounters, I ended up in a church, and then I heard a message that I could be a new creature. I heard that message. I heard that I could be free. I heard that I could be new, that a guilty, ashamed, struggling 18-year-old who was addicted could be free. And I said, I want that. I want that strange offer to be new. And when you come to Jesus, he loves you, he accepts you just as you are, but he loves you too much to leave you that way, right? Like he begins to make you just like him. And since those moments, God has put a burden on my heart to reach anyone who needs to know the forgiveness of Jesus. And I got to tell you, like, I pray every day that I'll look more strange than the person I used to be. Every day, further different than the person I used to be. And I want to keep being strange for Jesus. I don't care what the world says. I don't care what the newest scholars come up with. I don't care what my neighbors say, what my family says. I want to be different. I want to be strange. This world is not my home. This world is not your home. The world desperately needs strange. I want to live just as Jesus lived. I want to bring his kingdom here and invite many people to experience it as possible. Is that what you want too? I'm going to ask the band to come up behind me, and I want you to think about that. Is that what you want? A strange life where God takes what's broken and puts it back together. Imagine if everyone in this world that called themselves a Christian pursued Jesus just like that. They lived just as. Imagine what could happen. Imagine the fires we could put out. Imagine what God could do through you. Imagine the freedom you would feel if you would just embrace God today. Imagine the transformation in your marriage if you had some strange thinking and strange living going on in there. Imagine the kind of leader you could be, the kind of coworker you could be, the kind of parent you could be if you just decided, I'm going to live just as Jesus lived. Because I believe that if I were strange, if I were different, God could use me and God could make himself known. I'm going to ask you guys to stand up as we're about to sing. And if you have something you want to share with me, if you want a prayer, you want to give your life to Jesus, I'm going to be right in that back part of the room, and you're welcome to come with me. But for the next couple minutes, I want you to just give God the praise and the glory for taking you where you used to be and further from that, all for him, so that the world might know who he is. Let's sing to God.